My name is Kathryn Bacon-Goldman. I was Kathryn Bacon when I was Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Togo from 1998 to 2000. I don't know what group number I was because I don't think we used group numbers. I'm from North Carolina. Mostly grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. And now I'm the Director of Programming and Training. So I think my favorite thing about my service was just living in a totally different community from what I had ever lived in before, and just being part of the rhythm of that life and being part of people's just daily life, just where they ate, how they talked to each other, dancing with them on Sunday afternoon, just being a part of that community life. And I think also I loved the work I did with women's groups there. It was just fun and fulfilling. And thirdly, I love just traveling in West Africa. That was just awesome. So, yeah. So after I finished, I went back and worked for development organizations, different ones, NGOs and for-profits. I got a master's in international development. And then I worked in Uganda for 2 years on an HIV/AIDS project for one of those contractors. So then was pregnant, came back, lived in the United States again, had 2 children, and but my husband and I both love living overseas, so we kind of got the bug again and decided we wanted to try a new country, so Thailand worked out. I was working for a USA contractor called Kamanics, doing mostly health and then gender work. And then I saw an ad for Peace Corps headquarters hiring a gender specialist, and I had studied gender in my master's degree. So I applied and I got the job. So I worked in headquarters for 2 years as a gender specialist, and while I was there I started the process of getting a field position. So it's a slow process, kind of like becoming a volunteer. You have to apply onto a roster, then be interviewed several times, and then you kind of wait for a country director to select you off the roster. So it took a while, but so I was in headquarters for 2 years and then moved here at the beginning of 2015. So I would say that, you know, being a woman in West Africa, it was not as hard as like I thought it might be, because as a foreigner you have this extra privilege that Togolese women didn't have. Of course, all women worry for our safety, like no matter where we are, but after I'd been there a few months, that wasn't too big of a factor because I knew how to take care of myself. But I would say it impacted my work a lot, and that I just sort of, the longer I was in the country, the more I observed kind of the different way the men's world and the women's world worked in West Africa, and how there were these women's groups and they had their own whole way of organizing their money, their own way of supporting each other, their own social systems. And I started working with those women's groups and I got really interested in that. I just gradually over time got more aware of how it wasn't so black and white in terms of, you know, women's oppression or whatever. Like there was all these different dynamics going on that was just so interesting, which gave me a real passion for working on gender in the future in my life. Not in the way I would have expected. I think, like, there's this quote I remember reading that, like, you think you're going to join Peace Corps and find out what it means to be poor, and instead you find out what it feels like to be fabulously rich. And in my community, my $200 a month made me one of the wealthiest people there. And I felt so aware of my money and my privilege and everything, like all the access to every education and opportunity I'd ever had. Just all of that, I was so aware of it in a way I had never been before. And I think even just aware of being an American and what that means, like coming from the most powerful country in the world, people asking you about that constantly. You don't reflect on those things when you're in the United States, but when you're outside of it, all of a sudden you're faced with, you know, I mean, the youth would ask me all the time, why is America so much more powerful than Togo? I mean, how do you answer that? It's really, but in a good way. It raises your awareness of those things, and I think it just made me a lot more humble in life. So, you know, I went in with the typical, like, okay, I'm this liberated, equal woman from the West, and I'm gonna, like, share my experience. And I did that somewhat. I love to tell people how my dad could cook, and I love to tell people how, you know, my mom was a university professor, and, like, how, I love to do that. But I also, like, over time, I became a lot less judgmental about what I saw around me. And in Togo, a lot of men have multiple wives. And of course, like, from our perspective, that's very, like, terrible. But a lot of those women, they liked the arrangement. They could work in the market, have help at home, spread the responsibility for childcare, for businesses. And I just came to see things are not always what they look like from the outside. But then younger Togolese women, who were my close friends, like, they didn't really want that life. They wanted something different. But what? You know, there was just so much changing. So I guess, like, the longer I was there, the more nuance I saw everything. And the more I realized also that the women that I worked with, they mostly hadn't gone to school. They didn't have formal businesses. They didn't have, like, a lot of things, but they had a lot of power and influence in their community, just in a totally different way. And they had a lot of abilities to do things. You just had to take time to see it. We took girls from the villages to the main city in our region and showed them, like, what women could be in their profession. So it could be anything from, like, we took them to see car mechanics, hairdressers, accountants, like a wide range of things. I sought out working with the market women because I felt like I wanted to contribute in that space. I wanted to work with women. And so I did all this work with different women's groups in villages all around my site. And I tried to teach them business skills, which, you know, I don't know if they really got anything from that, to be honest. But I would also sit with them in the market, and I got to know a lot of them. And right before I left, one of them said to me, you know, Kathryn, like, before you came, I didn't see myself as a businesswoman. Like, I just thought, I sell this stuff in the market because, like, that's what we all do. But now I think of myself, I own a business, and I need to think about my business and how I use the money and what decisions I make. And I thought, okay, you know, like, even if, I don't know if they learned accounting skills or feasibility studies, but I liked that, like, oh, I own a business. Because you get marriage proposals all the time and, like, harassment all the time. And, like, I would just be like, oh, okay, I'll marry you, that's fine, but I don't really cook or clean or, like, take care of children, so, like, I need to work. So we can be married, but you're gonna have to do all that stuff. And, like, they would just laugh so hard. And, like, you know, like, that was just so funny. Like, yeah, so on the sexual harassment and stuff, which was very constant, much more constant than Thailand, like, you just, like, most people just wanted, like, a joke and to be acknowledged. And so if you just, like, yeah, okay, you can be my husband, but, you know, you have to do the cooking, that was fine. Non-gender challenges, I mean, I had all of them, you know, like, I didn't know what I was doing there. It was hot, I was bored, like, I cried, like, all of those things. And I think sometimes I would have to just stop and be like, why is this bothering me so much? Why is this one problem? What is it about me that I need to understand? And that was really useful because it really forces you to think like that. And sometimes you're like, I really hate hierarchy or whatever. And you can, like, get in touch with that. And something about being in touch with, like, what it is you don't like about the situation helps you deal with it. And I felt like also just realizing some of our own cultural things, like, we're so obsessed with productivity as Americans. So if I didn't have anything to do in a day, I would be like, so, like, I need to do something, I need to work, and then I'd be like, why? Okay, I just need to be here. You just go to the market, talk to my women, have some food, like, you know? Yeah, I think, you know, the humility was big. Like, I you know, I knew I wanted to work in development, and Peace Corps is my first big step in working in development, and then like get to my community, and I'm one of these like volunteers who's like, I'm gonna do all these projects and make a big difference and create an NGO, and like, and you know, the great thing about Peace Corps is it makes you humble, because it makes you realize how hard this stuff is, and that you don't just walk into a community as an outsider and fix it, and you don't bring that from the outside. It doesn't work that way, and the communities do things their way for a reason, and I think that humility is huge, and I think to even work in development at all, like we all need to have that humility about our role as an outsider. And so I think that's big. Sense of humor. I mean, you have to laugh at yourself, you know, and then I think just having perseverance and keep trying different things. I mean, you know, when I went through some phases that were really hard, bad things happened, and you just have to kind of keep going, have that like determination. So one other aspect of privilege that I realized was the whole white skin and Americans being assumed to be smarter and better than everyone. And it made me so sad how many people in my community would say, oh, white people are just smarter. And I would try to be like, no, that's not true. And they're like, look at the world. You go to the moon, you do all these things. Like, look at us here. And I was like, yeah, everything in the world is telling them that message. And me just sitting here like, no, it's not true. Like, that was really depressing. And also, it's why when Obama was elected, I felt strongly like what that would mean for my community to see that person in leadership position. And the other thing related to humility is I was working with a women's group, and I was trying to get them to have a sort of democratic election of their leaders, and because they had this big group and they saved money together, but they didn't really have an organization. So I'm like, yeah, you should elect a president, a vice president, a treasurer, secretary, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. And so we set a day, and I go. Well, and of course, then it was canceled the first time because there was a funeral. And then it was like canceled again because like somebody was sick. And finally I go, we sit down outside, all the women are there. And they're like, okay, President Charlotte. And they bring her up and they like clap. And then they're like, Vice President. And they say another name and they clap. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you doing? We're gonna have an election, right? Like, choose. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, you know, like have multiple people and then you vote. And they're like, and then somebody's gonna lose and they're gonna be standing right here in front of everyone. And I was like, well, when you put it that way. And they were like, we would never do that. Like, we've been talking amongst ourselves, and we know this person should be the president because everyone trusts her, and this person should be the secretary because they have the best writing skills, and this person we can trust with the money because they, you know, work in the health center. And so we have figured it out. Like, what do you want us to do? Like, bring people up and make people choose in front of everyone? And I was like, yeah, you're right. This is a terrible idea. And it was this great moment of like, oh, I came in here and I thought I knew how to teach these people about a democratic election, but really they knew a lot more than I did. I love working on development. I love managing projects and teams of people, and I like working in a group, and I like managing people. So I just want to keep doing that. You know, in some form. I love working for Peace Corps because it's this combination of meaningful development work where I get to think about schools and English teaching and youth development, but it's also like developing the volunteers. And like I love working with volunteers because I feel like everyone's different, everyone's unique, everyone's got their thing to offer. And so it's this great mix of supporting people and also working on development. So like I feel lucky to have this job for that reason.
Have you eaten yet?